Hi, everybody. Hey, Mr. Forestier here. Hey, if you weren't able to make the Zoom session on Tuesday, I just wanted to put together a little quick recording to kind of go over the basics of what I covered. It wasn't a required Zoom session. I know it was kind of thrown at the last minute, but it was just a way to kind of touch base with everybody. So this recording will do the same basic thing. If you already attended it on Tuesday, then you don't have to really watch this video or whatever. So let me start off here by sharing my screen. So, okay, I'm going to go into Canvas. There we go. Okay, so, let's get to where we're at. So let's go over to our modules, and then let's go over, I'm going to open up the course outline real quick so we can kind of look and see where we're at this particular moment. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here. Let's see, we just finished the Windows final stuff, whatever. We're in week 11. So what's scheduled this week is Chapter 14, Planning a Linux Installation, and Chapter 1, Introduction to the Linux Operating System. And those homeworks are due this Saturday, October 24th, okay? The homework for this class is basically the same thing. We have a new book, okay? So it's a smaller book and stuff. It's the Linux Operations and Administration. At the end of each chapter, there is a small section on homework, okay? And that homework includes, give me a second here, I'm gonna flip to my own brain here and say, okay. They should be just a bunch of little short answer questions that I think that would be really good for you guys to kind of go through. You don't actually have to do it as homework. They're called review questions. And there's only like about 20 or so, whatever. Again, they're not homework. The homework is the study guides that you've been doing all along inside of Canvas, okay? But I'm gonna draw for your midterm and your Linux final, I'm gonna draw from the study guides and probably these questions as well, okay? But you only have to turn in for group homework the study guides that are in Canvas, okay? So I just want to make sure that one was kind of clear, okay? So anyway, so you have that. So it's a newer book, whatever, that we're working with. And again, this book is using SUSE Linux. At the end of the book, there's actually a CD, okay, that you can use to install it, or I give you a link to an ISO where you can actually install the ISO onto a drive, okay? And so let me come back here to, let's see, our modules again. Here we go. And then I'm going to go down to where I have the basic web links, okay? Now, at the beginning of the semester, I shared this with you a little bit before and stuff about something like VMware. There are a lot of virtual software programs that are out there and stuff, but VM, I think, is probably one of the more popular ones, one of the longer ones that have been around for a while and stuff, and most stable, okay? So what happens is this, is that let's say that you have a computer, you have a drive, and you want to run virtual operating systems on it. Well, first of all, this should be a relatively decent computer. When I mean decent computer, I mean you really should make sure you have like, 12 gigs of RAM, 8, getting close, whatever and stuff. It would be nice if it's an i7 computer, i5, i3. I'm not sure I do an i3, and plenty of drive space or whatever. Graphics card would be great. You can look at your system requirements for VMware. But my point is, if your computer is 10 years old, I'm not sure I would try using the VMware. And if you're not able to do this on a computer, on a drive someplace, whatever, then it might be for this part of the class, because we're not doing it in the classroom, that it may be more of an academic exercise where you're reading the materials and going through the study guides and you're just doing academic testing, okay? But it really, really is helpful if you get a chance to do some hands-on things. So if you're able to install VMware, again, it's like a software program. So you can look at the system requirements, install it, okay? And then from there, you can then install a Linux ISO inside of it, okay? So the first thing you had a VMware link. So I'm gonna click on here. And it says open it up into a new window, no problem. And then again, I want to make sure that I can share the screen. So I'm going to do this again so I can make sure you're actually seeing it. There we go. And share. There we go. And so you can click on here. This is the 15.0 version. I believe there's a newer one out there as well, but you could download that particular one, okay, and go from there. All right. So then let me come back. So that was that one, okay, whoops, sorry, here we go, okay. And when it comes to the ISO, let's say that you have the book, but you didn't have the CD with it, and you want the one that actually goes with the book. So here's a link to the SUSE 9.0 ISO that matches the book. And again, I'm gonna go ahead and stop this sharing and reshare, just to make sure, again, that it's actually getting to the right place. Let's see, here we go. Oops, okay, hold on. Got it. I'm on my screen. Hold on. Here we go. Open up into a new window. There we go. Let me do that one more time. Let me, a new share. That's, yeah, ISO on here. Okay, cool. And then, you know, an ISO image that you can take here to download SUSE 9.0 for the i386 processors, basically, okay? Again, this is an older version. You can try using almost any Linux distribution would probably get you through most of this book that we're going to cover. It just simply will have different terms. You know, again, when you're in Windows, you have like control panel. Okay, and we do control panel for everything, right? We do it to install hardware. We can do it to check software. We can do it to set up user accounts, all sorts of things, whatever. Okay. Well, in Linux operating system, they do the same thing. They'll have their version of control panel, but maybe it's their setup tool and they have a name for it. And because these are different companies that make different Linux distributions, they could use a different name, but it's still the same place you go to do hardware and software configurations. Okay, so that's the same thing. Okay, so basically, and what I'll do is that, you know, perhaps tomorrow I'll put together a couple of links and stuff that kind of show you about VMware and then show you about, you know, Linux installations, things like that, so you can get kind of a feel for it as well. Okay, so let me go ahead and return back to where we're at, which was our web links. And again, I want to go ahead and do this new share to get back to where we were at. There we go. Okay. And then we have a link to OpenSUSE. Okay. Because that's the open community versus the direct SUSE 9.0 under the company's name. But also I wanted to show you that there is a Distro Watch, okay, website. So I'm going to click on that one and open up this one here. Again, let me go ahead and do a new share. So Distro Watch is a place that I just wanted you to be able to see that this is kind of like a group of people got together and stuff and said, hey, there's so many Linux distributions and there's so much information out there that this site, again, it's been around for a long time and stuff, you know, puts a lot of things together, like reading forums and stuff about, you know, what's going on with a particular distribution. If I scroll down here, I sit there and say, hey, the most common distribution downloads in the last 6 months is MX Linux.